Good morning, students. This video is for class 4 science, and today also we will continue with material and solution. In the last class we have discussed about soluble and insoluble substances. So when a solution is formed, and suppose if you need to separate the solute and the solvent, you have to have a method, you have to have a process to separate this solution, separate the component of solution. This method of solution this method sorry methods to separate soluble and insoluble substances. So these methods, there are methods to separate soluble substances as well as insoluble substances. So suppose, let us first discuss about the methods to separate insoluble substances. The first method is sedimentation, decantation and filtration. These three methods work together so that we can separate the insoluble substances from the solvent. So let us discuss about it. Substances in a solution can be separated using simple separation method. The method of single separation method depends on the type of solution. So this separation method, the method that we use to separate the soluble as well as insoluble substances, it depends upon the type of substances that are dissolved in it or that are mixed in the solvent. As the insoluble substances do not dissolve in the solvent, they can be separated by sedimentation, decantation and filtration method. So just because the substances are insoluble, so these substances, the substances that are insoluble, that do not get mixed, that do not get dissolved in water, they can be separated by sedimentation, decantation and filtration. Whereas the soluble substance can be separated by evaporation method. Whereas the soluble substances, suppose if a substance is totally fully dissolved in water, then the method that can be used to separate those soluble substances is evaporation method. So first let us discuss about sedimentation and decantation. What is sedimentation? So let us take an example so that it becomes clear for you to understand the sedimentation process. Suppose if you take an insoluble substance, suppose sand, and you mix that mixed sand in water. How will you separate? The first process is sedimentation. That means once the sand gets mixed in the water, keep that jar in which the sand is mixed separately in a place and let it be untouched for some time. You will see after some time the solid particles, the sand particles, they will settle at the bottom of the water. This process of settling of the sediments is known as sedimentation. So sedimentation is the process of removing insoluble substances from any liquid by allowing it to stand undisturbed for some time in a container. So if you take the solution of insoluble solid and water and keep that container aside without disturbing it, you will see the sediments will start settling at the bottom. This process is known as sedimentation. This process causes the heavier insoluble substances to settle down at the bottom of the container. Decantation is carried out directly after sedimentation. So once the solid particles, they settle at the bottom of the water, the next process is decantation. And in this process, what we do is that we take the container in which the solution is kept, and the water at the top, after the sediments getting settled down, the water at the top is poured carefully into another container without the sediments getting removed from that container to another container. So this process of pouring the clear water that is at the top of the liquid, top of the container, at the top of the container, this process is known as decantation. So in decantation process, the clear liquid obtained after sedimentation is transferred, it is poured into another container carefully so that the insoluble substances settle at the bottom do not get disturbed. So after the settling of the sedimentation, the pouring down of the clear liquid into another container is known as decantation. For example, take muddy water in a container and allow it to stand undisturbed for some time. The heavier substances present in muddy water like soil and sand will settle down at the bottom, and the clear water can be slowly poured into another container. So if you take a solution of mud and water and mix it and let it be and let it aside, keep it aside undisturbed for some time, you will see the solid particles will settle at the bottom, and the clear water is poured into another container. This process is known as decantation. So sedimentation is and decantation is a process by which we can separate insoluble substances solution. So children, please put a tick mark till here. In the next class, we will discuss about filtration and evaporation. So for today up to this much. Thank you class.